We're gonna give you the best bicep exercise for size and strength. And we're gonna start right.
My nervous system has potentiated a little bit more, and I'm able to handle a higher load. And over time, that's gonna create a little bit more muscular density, okay? Are your biceps stagnant? They can't grow anymore. They're flaccid, they can't get a peak, and you can't add any more strength. If you're looking for the 3 best movements for biceps, you have it right here. And what we like to do here at Garage Strength is we like to incorporate the positions of flexion when we're comparing anything that's going to develop a serious amount of strength and a serious amount of muscle mass. And if we're talking about the biceps, we 100% want to get a ton of muscle mass on top of those so we can develop that massive peak and lead to those sleeves getting nice and tight. So exercise number 1, homers. So we call them homers. No one else on the planet is doing them, and I guarantee you will get the biggest pump out of doing homers. So homers involve 2 different aspects. There's going to be it's a mid-range contraction, and it's going to utilize isometric contractions as well. So what we like to do is we will hold the dumbbells at 90 degrees, which is going to stimulate a whole bunch of time under tension. And as you hold at 90 degrees, you're going to walk 10 to 15 meters. When you get to the end of that 10 to 15 meters, you're gonna do the concentric portion of the lift. And you're just gonna hammer those through. You don't have to have a ton of control, but just a little bit of control so you're not swaying all over the place. And here's the kicker, is that you've gotta walk 10 to 15 meters back, holding at 90 degrees, and then you're gonna finish off that massive burn with another 8 to 10 reps, and that is where you're gonna get a ton of muscular mass gains from that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy attacking those biceps. Exercise 2, dumbbell incline curls. So dumbbell incline curls is going to utilize a massive stretch in that bicep, and when we have that massive stretch, we've got to remember, lengthening is strengthening. So that massive stretch is going to lead to a myotatic reflex. And what ends up happening over time is throughout that set, while you're leaning back on that incline, you're going to get that lengthening. You can turn the wrist back just slightly. That's going to force the bicep to recruit a little bit more high threshold motor units, which is going to lead to an increase in strength. As your strength increases, so will your size. But it's important to recognize that when you're laying back, you have the elbows fully extended, and you have an extension of that wrist, and you will feel that nice stretch all the way up through the bicep, and that is going to lead to incredible size gains. Exercise 3, another one from Bis and Tries 2, the glute ham dumbbell head curl. Okay, so this is an exercise that is involved with being completely contracted at the top of the curl, and that is what's going to develop that thick peak. And on top of that, because you're utilizing the head of the dumbbell, you're going to have to utilize a bit more grip work. So when we're forced to utilize more grip work, now we're also going to recruit more high threshold motor units from our prime movers. Our prime movers in the glute head dumbbell curl are biceps. So over the entire set, not only are we going to develop our brachioradialis, we're also going to stimulate a ton of strength gains throughout that short and long head. And when we're stimulating those high threshold motor units in the short and long head over time, especially over 5 to 6 sets of 15 to 17 reps, now we're gonna have a ton of metabolic stress entering into the cell in that bicep, and that's where we're gonna have expansion and ultimately massive size gains. So utilize these top 3 bicep builders: homers, dumbbell incline curl, glute ham dumbbell head curl. You're gonna lead to massive gains. Your biceps are finally gonna start to fill out that youth medium shirt that you have. As we think through training and stimulating muscular growth in the biceps, we've gotta understand, one, what type of muscular contractions do we have? We have eccentric contraction where the bicep head can get lengthened. We've got isometric contractions where we will not change the length of the bicep, okay, and it just stays here. And then we can have the concentric portion where the bicep head actually shortens. Now, if we can go back to our positions of flexion or our problems of flexion video where we understood that there's the mid-range flexion point, there's the extended flexion point, and then there's a contracted flexion point. Now we can start to piece together what is it that's missing in our bicep training and how can we go about improving that. And so I'm gonna provide 3 key aspects that hit all 3 of these points to get your muscular growth off the charts in regards to your bicep. Lesson number 1, utilize a myotatic reflex. So what is a myotatic reflex? Think about when the doctor hits your knee with one of those little hammers and you get that reflex. It's a type of reflex. It's also very similar to when you roll your ankle on a sidewalk and your body jolts real fast to protect itself. It's part of that stretch shortening cycle. And so it's something that we can utilize in bicep training by hitting big positions from an incline curl. And when you're hitting that incline curl, it's not just being in a fully lengthened position, it's actually understanding that your wrist can cock back, and when the wrist comes back, you can get a mild reflex inside that bicep, and now all of a sudden your bicep's going to recruit more high threshold motor units, which in turn will lead to greater muscular coordination and over time, greater muscular size as you stimulate sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So utilize the myotatic reflex to lead to greater strength gains and to wake up those muscle fibers in the biceps so that you can stimulate greater growth. Number 2, utilize isometric contractions. This is one of the best ways to get massive size in your biceps, okay? So one thing that we utilize quite a bit in Bis and Tris 1 and Bis and Tris 2, both of which are available at garagestrength.com, is isometric contractions, but we like to use them synergistically with concentric contractions, okay? So we have an exercise known as homers. No one on the planet does homers except for Garage Strength, and that's why we've got big bis at Garage Strength. If you'll start and you'll walk at a 90-degree angle with those dumbbells holding isometrically in the mid-range. And if we can remember back to that position deflection video, we know that the mid-range is our strongest point, and we know that the mid-range can dramatically increase strength. So that's our most advantageous position. We're gonna hold it there isometrically, and then when we walk 10 meters, we're gonna do 10 curls, and then we're gonna hold back at that mid-range isometric position, and we're gonna walk back 10 meters and then do 10 curls. So time under tension is drastically lengthened, which is going to lead to a bigger metabolic response, but fortunately we're holding it in that mid-range position, which happens to be our strongest position with the biceps. And now all of a sudden we can stimulate massive growth. When we get to the end and we're doing the eccentric portion of the lift, after we walk 10 meters, now all of a sudden we're getting a nice lengthening of our bicep. Then we're gonna contract big at the top for that greater mind-muscle connection, and utilizing homers for 4 to 5 sets will immediately lead to the biggest muscular pump that you've ever had in your biceps. So the third trick that I wanna give you guys is the reciprocity recipe for massive muscular growth. And so this is actually where we're gonna utilize triceps synergistically with biceps at the exact same time. So some research has shown that when you're utilizing antagonistic muscles at the exact same time, both muscles can lead to increased growth. Okay, and on top of that, you're gonna have a greater mind-muscle connection, you're gonna have greater intramuscular coordination, which is going to lead to greater high-threshold motor unit recruitment, and then over time, you can use greater weights while under longer periods of tension. That's gonna elicit an even bigger metabolic response, and that's gonna bring in more extracellular water, which is gonna lead to massive hypertrophic gains. Okay, so when we're doing the principle of reciprocity, we will actually be utilizing a tricep push-down machine at the same time as doing a standing bicep curl. And so we'll be doing a tricep push down, and we will extend rapidly while at the exact same moment we'll be contracting as hard as we possibly can, and then we will go through the eccentric motion of both lifts slowly and controlled, and that's going to stimulate our mind-muscle connection, and we're going to continue through that position, and we're going to be able to get a ton of reps both on the back end of our upper arms and on the front end of our upper arms, so we can lead to massive muscular growth in our biceps and as well in our triceps. We can start to fill out those sleeves and we can start to feel a little bit better about who we are when we're walking into the gym. So bicep training tends to get a bad rap, especially in the world of sports performance and athletic performance. A lot of coaches don't want to isolate. They think the isolation is the devil, right? They're like,
don't touch any machines, they're horrible. You don't want to train in single joint movements. It's terrible to do that.
And I think that the problem ends up being is that if there's a structural problem, if you've got shoulder issues here, or if you've got elbow issues, there's actually benefits from isolating those joints and by actually training through those positions, and that can actually improve other positions. So if I do have a shoulder issue or I do have a bicep issue down here, I can do isolated bicep eccentric tendinopathies. Let's just say something along those lines to help deal with my elbow pain, or with my shoulder pain, I go overhead and my shoulder sort of bugs me. There might be a weakness or a tightness or whatever it might be in my shoulder that prevents me from going overhead because of my bicep. So now if I can isolate that and start to do some specific work, my overhead position might improve. My front position, if I'm bench pressing, might improve because of the bicep work that we're doing. And so it's important to realize that there's a lot more to it than just isolation and machines. You can actually find a significant benefit. And one of those movements that I really like to utilize for bicep training is something that I refer to as a post curl. In a post curl, I like to be standing, and most of the time when we're gonna be doing our bicep work or our tricep work, I like to have my athletes stand, because this is where we're gonna be when we're typically doing most of our athletic movements. And on top of that, if I'm standing, I can produce a little bit more force, I can produce a little bit more power, and that's gonna help transfer to a heavier load. And so one of the things that I love about a post curl as well is it's gonna give me a longer stretch here, okay? And even just with that slight bit of wrist extension here into wrist flexion, I can lengthen my bicep, and I'm gonna be back behind. I'm gonna have lengthened pecs and shoulders here, and I wanna get a big curl coming up with that slow eccentric. It's a way for me to provide a decent amount of support with my back and to increase my range of motion in my bicep, and also lengthen my pec, lengthen my shoulder, which can then in turn lead to better positions if I'm pressing, better positions overhead. If I do it with a dumbbell with a hammer grip, okay, so like a hammer curl here, I get that nice stretch here, I get good tension, and I wanna hold here at the top for some isometric work. And what ends up happening is that when we're holding at the top, okay, if I'm a grappler, if I wrestle or I do jujitsu, or even if I'm an offensive or defensive lineman, when we're in this position right here, okay, we have elbow co-contraction happening if I'm pass pro as an offensive lineman. If I'm grappling with somebody here, okay, we're gonna have elbow co-contraction. That means my bicep is gonna be activated and my tricep. And so one of the big key factors here with the post curls, with that hammer grip, now I'm gonna train that co-contraction. That co-contraction is to make my elbow more stable. Same thing if I get that deep stretch here, come up, that co-contraction of the bicep, and I also wanna light up my tricep. That's gonna help transfer to that sporting world, and that's the big key factor, is that you've gotta understand the purpose behind it, okay? So if I wanna train to create more elbow stability, think about locking out overhead as a weightlifter, think about punching as an offensive lineman, think about throwing the shot. If we have more stability in that joint, that's gonna provide a lot more safety, and it could potentially prevent injury. And so if you do these, once or twice a week for 4 sets of 20 to 25 reps, now you're gonna dramatically increase the strength of your bicep, and you're also gonna hit that better positioning related to your shoulder. So that next awesome bicep movement that I love to utilize with my athletes is going to be homers. And so I like to utilize homers with a towel. And the reason why I like to do this is because of how well it trains my grip. So if I'm training my grip, I wanna walk with the towels, with the dumbbells attached to the towels, and I might walk for 10 to 15 meters. At that position right here, this is that, we wanna look for that elbow co-contraction, right? Then we're gonna get to the end, and we're gonna utilize this with curl. Then we're gonna go back, we're gonna turn around, and we're gonna have even more time under tension. We wanna train this, we wanna come back, get to the end, curl again. Typically, we're gonna do 10 to 12 curls on each end, okay? So we're gonna walk with that isometric position at that 90 degrees, and we'll walk for 10 to 15 meters. We'll hit those curls, walk again in that isometric position, hit those curls again. And the big thing here, think about wrestlers, think about jujitsu. The towel almost mimics the gi perfectly. Now we start talking about throwers, shot putters, baseball players. If you need grip work, this is key to improving your grip, to improving your brachioradialis, and connecting that with your bicep. So it's going to help stabilize that elbow joint. It's gonna also help stabilize your wrist. Now all of a sudden you're a little bit stronger. And on top of that, like I mentioned earlier with the post curls, we're doing it while we're walking, while we're standing, and that's gonna help you transfer that over to the sporting world. So a couple key factors too that we've got to remember when we're working with the biceps is one of the main reasons why I like doing homers with a towel is because our biceps tend to be a little bit slower twitch, especially related to our triceps. When we're training a slower twitch muscle group, okay, like the biceps, it pays to do a lot of isometric work. So that's where the homers came into play. It also pays off to do a lot of overhead work because it can put you in a position of flexion that's advantageous to shoulder health. Two key factors behind bicep training. Isometric work pays off a lot, and a type of overhead bicep work is going to dramatically improve your shoulder health. And that's where I like to utilize spider curls. That's the third exercise here, spider curls. Sometimes I might do them over a box. I might do them over the side of a bench, or I might do it over the side of jerk boxes I've done in the past. And here we've got our Scott bench or our preacher curl bench right here. Now, what ends up happening is if I can get into position and I'm here and I can move my hips back quite a bit, okay? Now I'm lengthening that bicep as much as possible, and I'm in almost an overhead position here. And I want to get that contraction at the top. Think about, this is a very similar position I would be in if I was on a crossover machine, okay? A cable crossover, it's gonna be almost the exact same position, but the benefit becomes I can load it quite a bit more than I would a cable crossover because I've got a fat grip barbell, okay? An easy curl barbell. So we're not only gonna lead to that nice stretch in the bicep, we're going to improve our grip because of the size of the bar. You can see this, we got a 1 3/4 inch bar. But we're also going to improve our overhead stability. So think about the way I was just seated, I'm here, now we come up when I'm standing, this is a position I'm gonna be in, so think about that cable crossover. The position of flexion now, when I'm at that top, it's that top range that's really going to lead to some serious growth in the bicep, and that is exactly where that top range, when we're in a semi-overhead position, that's going to protect the shoulder. So spider curls, if you've got somebody who has shoulder issues, they have shoulder stability issues, put spider curls in their program once, twice a week. They're easy to recover from, 3 to 5 sets, higher reps, because they're slower twitch. Okay, so my number one trick to blowing up your biceps as an athlete and having that transfer over to other sports, right? So in the past, we've done videos on positions of flexion, we've done videos on pre-fatigue. And one of the big key factors is if I see somebody who's just got pathetic biceps and you think about a wrestler, they can barely hold an underhook. They get a knee pick and they just cannot hold on to that knee at all. They can barely hold on to a cradle. Or if I see a shot putter with serious elbow problems because of the speed of release, right? One of the key factors that we can utilize is pre-fatigue. And so what that means is, I'm gonna show you right here, is that I've got fat grip zottmans, okay? So fat grips is gonna help me increase the strength in my wrist flexors and my forearm flexors. It's gonna help me recruit quite a bit more in my biceps, okay? And I'm gonna come up, I'm gonna rotate, and I'm gonna bring them back down, okay? Supinate, pronate, okay? Supinate, pronate. And what I wanna do is I wanna stimulate my biceps quite a bit. I'm gonna be fatigued, but almost to that point where I can barely do another rep. Okay, so let's say we do 17 to 20 reps, fat grip zottman curls, okay? I'm getting a decent pump in my forearms, I'm getting a decent pump in my biceps, okay? I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna drop it. Now the key is I wanna rest about 30 to 60 seconds. So put them down, I'm gonna rest about 30 to 60 seconds. We're gonna walk over, and one of the big key factors that I love of bicep training is I just isolated my elbow, okay? So fatigue the hell out of my biceps and my forearm flexors. Now, one of the best movements that we can do to stimulate our biceps is a compound movement, a chin up, a curl up. I call them curl ups. When we do a curl up, especially if it's weighted, it's taking the bicep and putting a ton of load on it, and it's training your bicep how to co-contract and coordinate, how to coordinate properly with your shoulders. So we just pre-fatigued, now we're gonna hit the curl up. Our grip's a little fatigued, our biceps are a little fatigued. We wanna pause in the bottom, get a slow eccentric. We gotta remember the isometric position, biceps respond really well to time under tension. So we wanna get a slower eccentric, a little bit of a pause in the lengthened position here. Up. And then as I get tired, what I like to do, 1, 2. One more. 1, 2, down slow. Okay, so when we get to the top, we're gonna squeeze, bring that sternum into the bar. That's gonna help blow up the biceps. It's gonna help increase the strength and the size. It's gonna help you become a better athlete. So if you want help with your bis and tris, if you wanna blow up your biceps, you wanna blow up your triceps, we've got bis and tris 1 and 2. These are 2 books that I put together. They're cheap, they're under 30 bucks. And they've got a whole bunch of information behind bicep and tricep training that's gonna help you add some serious mass, add some size to your bis, add some size to your tris. You can click on the link down below in the description. You can head over to garagestrength.com and you can pick up bis and tris 1 and 2 so you can get those upper arm gains.
So do we even know what the biceps are? Do we know what muscles we need to train to really fill out those sleeves? Or if you're not wearing sleeves, to make your arms look decent. Okay, so for starters, we have to look at the biceps first through those 2 main muscles, okay? The 2 main heads, actually. And so the biceps brachii is here on our upper arm, on our upper limb. And we're gonna have that short head right on the inside. And that short head is gonna be responsible, 1, for stabilizing that shoulder joint, okay? Also for arm flexion when we're in supination. But the other thing is it's gonna be responsible for adduction. Think if I'm laying on my side and I'm adding my hand to my body, okay, that's gonna be my bicep, my short head of my bicep. If I think about the long head, that's gonna be the outside of my bicep here, the longer portion here, okay? So this part will be responsible for abduction, arm flexion and supination, and anything else related to arm flexion in general, okay? Even if we're in this pronated position. So those are the 2 main aspects behind that upper arm. I like to think about it through 4 different muscles though. That's gonna bring in that 3rd key muscle, and that's gonna be the brachialis, okay? So the brachialis is in through here. If I was really lean and gave you that double back pose here, you'd be able to see right around this part, which you probably can't see, that brachialis. So fortunately, we're gonna have a sweet graphic up on the screen. That muscle is actually the strongest arm flexor because of the way it's draped over our elbow joint. So when we're flexing in any position, it could be supinated, it could be neutral, it could be pronated. When we're in that position, the brachialis is actually the strongest arm flexor. This is gonna be the same muscle that we use when we're doing pull-ups, okay? So if we're doing chin-ups or curl-ups, that's gonna be more of our biceps brachii, the 2 heads. When we're doing pull-ups, or if we're swimming crawl stroke, that's gonna be the brachialis. That 4th key muscle is gonna be the brachioradialis. So that's gonna be this muscle right here that's sort of draped over the top of our forearm into our elbow. This is another muscle that's really responsible for supination, pronation, a little bit of elbow flexion, and it can add massive size to your entire arm to help you fill out your sleeves. So we know that if we want to train our biceps, we need to think about getting our forearms to curl or to flex towards our humerus, our upper arm. Okay, that's a big factor here. Now, We need to think about lever arms, okay? Especially when we think about the brachialis, we know that that's in there. We also know that we have to think about how are we gonna stabilize that shoulder. So that's where sports performance comes into play, is that training biceps can really help shoulder stability, and obviously the power of that arm flexion and arm stability in your elbow flexion, not arm flexion. We also have to think about reps and sets and even rest periods, because in reality, we just want to get swole. And can you believe that 5 years ago, I wrote 2 books called Bis and Tris 1 and 2. They're available at garagestrength.com today as an ebook. Okay, enough of that dorky shit. I just want to get big. Now, I'm going to give you a couple exercises that I love to use for big time biceps. And then I'm going to give you that #1 exercise that you can use to gain mass, size, and some serious strength. Okay, the first movement I love to use is the incline curl, okay? And when I do the incline curl, I even recommend trying to rest that head back. When you do this, just be aware of the position of your shoulders and your pecs and your biceps. Make sure that you can actually do that with mobility. The reason why this movement is so awesome is because of how it isolates the bicep heads, okay, short and long head, and how well it blows you up. The problem is you can't go crazy heavy. The load can't be that heavy. So you can gain a ton of mass, but not a ton of strength. So here, I'm gonna curl up, right? And you can go back down. And if you want, even when you do this, give a little bit of that wrist flexion back, curl back up. I guess it would be wrist extension. And you can even go into a neutral grip position here if you wanna blow up a little bit more of that brachioradialis. 4 sets of 17 for a crazy pump. Okay, so this next exercise I also love for bicep-based training. Now, the load on this can get pretty freaking heavy because we're doing a compound movement and we're using our prime movers are gonna be our lats, but we're also gonna be targeting the biceps, okay? So this is a really good exercise that you can use for mechanical drop sets. You can use this for pre-fatigue, for post-fatigue, whatever it is that you need to get a little bit bigger in those biceps. I love doing 5 sets of 5 weighted and then doing a drop set of 15 to 20 reps. And that's gonna be a chin up or a curl up. So we're here, pull up, you can go down nice and controlled, lengthen. And when you come up here, try and really squeeze those biceps at the top with your lats. The downfall here is that the isolation isn't as prominent as that incline curl, but the load is significant. Yes, I can't lock out my right elbow. Boo! Okay, this next movement is gonna help with the brachioradialis and the brachialis. Now remember, the brachialis is underneath our bicep heads, the short and the long head. So this is a movement that we need to train, and when we do that double back pose, it will blow up, but it's not gonna isolate our bicep heads as prominently, so we're not gonna have that huge peak. However, the brachialis can help push that peak a little bit higher. This movement is absolutely fantastic for the brachioradialis for massive freaking forearms. What we wanna do here, grab a fat bar, and if you don't have a fat bar, you can put towels around it, you can get fat grips, anything like that. We're here, okay? I wanna go a little bit of an internal curl here, okay? Then I'm gonna come up, curl. And that little bit of a wrist action is going to blow up your brachioradialis. But the whole movement is triggered from the forearm. Boom. And what I recommend doing is you can do this exercise, a little bit heavier. You got 2 10s on each side, right? Let's say you do 9, 10, 11 reps. What you can do then, take off a plate, and then once you want to really burn out, and this is a great movement if you're a wrestler, it's a great exercise if you're in BJJ, and if you're a football player, you have fumbling problems, you need to hold on to somebody, this is an absolutely fantastic exercise to also help improve that grip strength. Boom! Drop that weight, go to failure. Now, before we get to that #1 bicep exercise of all time, upper arm exercise is probably a better term. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell. We're trying to get to 1 million subscribers. the number one bicep exercise is going to be, let's go a little later, the zottman curl. So when we're doing a zottman curl, okay, we're gonna be in a standing position, ideally standing. I don't mind if you're doing an incline curl with a zottman sort of rotation, and that's gonna be seated. I prefer standing because you're gonna have a little bit greater power output. So I'm gonna get here, I'm gonna supinate up, so I'm gonna elbow flex, I'm gonna rotate down, and that's gonna place a greater eccentric load on my forearms, okay, on my brachioradialis, and a little bit even on my brachialis. So I'm gonna come back up, curl, so I'm gonna isolate those two heads, the short head on the inside, long head on the outside. I'm gonna rotate, I'm gonna feel that in my brachialis tremendously right now as I'm holding this. Okay, and then I'm gonna go down nice and easy and try and really target the brachioradialis on the eccentric. This works absolutely phenomenally to blow up those biceps, to train your brachialis, and to blow up your grip strength in your brachioradialis. And that's what makes this the absolute best movement. I recommend doing this once a week, twice a week. It's great for shoulder stability. It's great for elbow co-contractions because of what you're doing with the brachialis and the brachioradialis. It's absolutely fantastic for sports performance and for getting a crazy pump. I'm sweating. Okay, so what athletes can actually use this? So first of all, obviously bodybuilders should be using the zottman curl. And if bodybuilders who lack that forearm size relative to their upper extremity, they should be slaying zottman curls. Now, I also recommend someone like a discus thrower, even a shot putter that has a ton of force on their elbows, on their shoulders. That's where you can use zottman curls. And you can even add in a little bit of that shoulder abduction, a hair, if you need to improve that shoulder stability. I even love having my weightlifters use this movement because they go overhead so frequently. If their biceps are a little bit stronger, that's gonna help that overhead position. If we have offensive linemen or wrestlers, anybody who's grabbing or holding on to something, think about a running back like Nick Singleton, Big Ten Rookie of the Year. You have to have good forearm strength and bicep strength to prevent fumbles, to hold, to grab. Okay, that's where the zottman curl comes into play. Some people ask too, okay, Dane, you know, you do cheat curls a little bit, and we've got an old video way back in the YouTube archives from about 2.5, 3 years ago, where we actually go over the value of cheat curls. We could even redo that video if you comment down below. We'll do a whole video on cheat curls if you want. But one of the reasons why I like to use cheat curls is you can get a little bit heavier load, and then that eccentric portion triggers your brain to recruit more high threshold motor units, in turn helping you get a little bit stronger. So that's one of the main factors here. That's a whole bunch of different information that you can use when you're training for those big time biceps. So for athletics, general fitness, when can we program zottman curls? I recommend day 5. Use it on the hypertrophy day. Okay, you can do 4 sets of 7, 2 drop sets of 17 to 20 reps. Get creative. Think about gaining size and strength. Okay, again, 6 sets is going to get you a massive pump. I even like using it as an accessory early on in sports performance. So if we're in the exposure phase, the comprehension phase, use it as accessories to stabilize that shoulder girdle. So try this exercise today if you want to get massive biceps. So a lot of coaches struggle with what they can do with barbell movements when they're trying to target the bicep and the tricep. And so what I've done is I've tried to put together a whole bunch of different unique movements to try and solve various athletes' problems. And so some of the different exercises that I like to use can really target some problem areas. It can help improve the bench press. It can help improve your lockout in the split jerk. It can help keep your elbows healthy if you're an Olympic weightlifter. It can help keep your elbow flexors and extensors healthy if you're playing football, if you're a wrestler, anything along those lines. But it's the unique methods that we like to utilize. It's unique exercises. It's the way that we put them together with reps and sets that help us make these exercises so effective. So we're gonna go into the 6 different movements. We're gonna have 3 pairings of 2 movements, and you're gonna see exactly how we would program a very unique barbell, bicep, and tricep workout. So that first big exercise that we love to utilize is the reverse grip bench press. And so I like to go a little bit wider than a close grip. And this is something that I was schooled on when I was in high school. We used to see pictures of Anthony Clark, and Anthony Clark was a powerlifter, old-time powerlifter, who actually reverse grip benched 800 pounds. And back in the late 80s, he had even been, when he was a teenager, he had bench pressed 600 pounds. And one of the big factors that I've found with a reverse grip bench is that it kills the lateral head of my triceps, right? It just
absolutely blows it up. And so this is something that can help with your tricep size. It can help with that lockout, and it can also help with posting up on different opponents. One of the big key factors though is you've got to have a spotter. You're not going to be able to lift off with a reverse grip by yourself. You have to make sure that you have a spotter. I like to use a reverse grip bench for like 4 sets of 7 to 9 reps, and then I always like doing at least 2 big drop sets around 20 to 25 reps. And that lateral head is just going to start getting nice and puffy. You're going to get good gains, and you're also going to increase the strength of the tricep. All right, 1, 2, 3. Ooh, puffy tries. So I love pairing the one arm barbell curl with the reverse grip bench, and a couple reasons why. When I'm doing a one arm barbell curl, one of the big key factors is that I have to engage my grip. Okay, it's very similar to on the reverse grip bench. I also have to have a very strong grip to try and control that groove, to try and control that positioning. So when I superset that with the one arm barbell curl, it's not only gonna kill my biceps, okay, it's also going to show me where I might be weak when we're talking about my grip. If the barbell head starts to lean one side to the other, now we can really pinpoint on my forearm where that weakness might be, especially if we're talking about the brachioradialis. So we want to try and really stabilize the bar and keep it as level as possible while we're curling this. I also like to get a little bit of a forward lean here. I could do this upright, but I'd rather be in almost like an overhead position, a slight overhead position here, and that's gonna help me stay a little more focused. I like to see the bar while I'm doing this too, just so I can have a little bit better mind muscle connection. And I'm gonna do that again. If I'm pairing that with reverse grip bench, I'm gonna do 10 to 12 reps on the left, 10 to 12 reps on the right side. And then when I do at least one of my drop sets on the reverse grip bench, I'm gonna come over here and try and hammer this until I can't do it anymore. Okay, so the second pairing, I'm gonna start off with Lasha extensions. And the reason why I call this the Lasha extension is that in 2019, when I was around Lasha Talakadze in the warm-up room in Thailand at World Championships, I saw him do this at least 3 different times. And one of the big things that I noticed is he was always putting his grip almost completely together here. He would sometimes have his thumbs extended, but most of the time it was his grip was directly next to one another. And the reason why I've found that this is a really good exercise is that if I'm dealing with weightlifters who are gonna be overhead, if I'm gonna have a shot putter who's gonna be overhead, or my wrestlers that are gonna be overhead with jerks, whatever it might be, this lockout position is going to engage my thoracic spine. It's going to engage my triceps, and it's gonna help my triceps coordinate with my shoulder for more stability, while also really, really lengthening that tricep. So one of the big things that I like to focus on is that if I'm here, I wanna get overhead and I'm standing so I can actually use a little bit more weight. It's gonna be really good for any type of athlete, right? I like to go with a false grip here. I'm gonna get nice and deep and almost like I'm hugging my triceps to my head and extend, okay? Hug those triceps to your head, extend. So it's like bring those elbows in a bit. And then as you fatigue, your elbows will start to flare a little, and that's okay, because then now you're gonna be recruiting from another head on the tricep. So as you start, you wanna be nice and narrow, and you're gonna feel that a lot on the lateral head, okay? And then as you start to fatigue and your elbows get wider, I'm getting a nice pump. You're gonna really feel it on the medial head of the tricep. You're gonna get really, really pumped up. It's gonna help that lockout. It's gonna transfer over to a lot of different sports. So when I'm doing the Lasha extensions, I wanna superset my Lasha extensions with a hanging barbell curl. Okay, so hanging barbell curl is essentially, I'm gonna be standing upright. This would be a traditional barbell curl. Now, what I'm gonna do is I want to come forward and I want to bring my grip in a little bit. I'm almost at 90-degree hip flexion, okay? So what ends up happening is now I'm in almost an overhead position. My biceps are nice and lengthened, and I want to come to the top and pause almost right at my forehead, okay? When I'm here, that contraction, that position of flexion right here is extremely difficult to hold. So I want to get a slight isometric contraction at the top. Pause right here, contract those biceps nice and tight, and then lower, okay? And so this is going to be really, really good for weightlifters, for wrestlers. It's going to help a ton when they're getting that underhook, okay? So it's here, pause at the top, lower back down, and come back up. And one little trick that I also like to utilize, sorry I'm out of breath, is that when I'm doing this, sometimes I'll wrap a little bit of a band right around the middle part of the bar. If I put that around the middle part of the bar, then I step on it with my feet. Now when I get to the top, I have even more tension at the top, and that's gonna lead to even greater muscular recruitment, which is going to increase the strength of my biceps. All right, so the next exercise, this is the last tricep-based exercise for this barbell workout, and this is gonna be the horse extension. So one of the coolest things behind this is a movement that Jake Horst invented, okay? So this is something that we were trying to figure out his lockout in his jerks and in his snatch. Sometimes he can get pretty wobbly overhead. One, because he's light and he can snatch 141 kilos, but we were trying to figure out how can we strengthen his tricep into his shoulder. And so he actually came up with this movement to try and help with that lockout. And this is something that even wrestlers can utilize as well. Any sport can utilize this. I even like swimmers to be doing this as well, because there's gonna be a little bit of trunk stability involved. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get onto the bar here, okay? And this is a pretty difficult movement. And we wanna try and get our head in between our hands while we flex our elbows. So we're gonna go here, boom, up, okay? And this is, again, this is gonna light up all three heads of the tricep. Here, up. So we wanna stay nice and flexed in our gut, almost like we're pushing our belly button up to the ceiling, okay? So maybe a slight rounded back. Boom. 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 And so that's really, really difficult. And again, one of the hardest heads to hit on the tricep, I mean, lateral's tough, medial's tough as well. You're gonna feel those light up when you're doing this, and that's gonna help with that overhead stability. It's gonna help really lengthen the triceps, and when we lengthen it, that's when we're gonna start strengthening it. So all these movements we utilize in our Bis and Tris 2 book. You can get that book over at garagestrength.com. You can click on the link down below in the description. You can head over to garagestrength.com. You can pick up Bis and Tris 1 and Bis and Tris 2. We also offer a specific arm targeting program. So if you have small biceps, you have weak triceps, and you're trying to increase the mass and strength of your arms, pick up our specific arm targeting program today so you can get on those gains. Get big! All right, so that last barbell exercise that we're gonna utilize to try and blow up our biceps is double barrel post curls. This is one of my favorite exercises to smash your biceps. And I wanna get just a slight extension of my wrist at the beginning, then I'm gonna go flex. So when we flex, we're gonna start to light up our bicep, okay? Then we're gonna flex about a quarter of the way up. We're gonna lower back down. We're gonna go full range, up almost right to your forehead. We're gonna lower for about a quarter, then we're gonna come back up, squeeze nice and tight, then lower. So it's a double barrel. Quarter, up, squeeze, quarter, back up, lower, nice and slow. Quarter, up, back up. And so one, the post provides some support so you're not cheating, you're not rocking all over the place. Cheat curls are okay, but in this case, I wanna really focus on having some back stability. One of the big key factors here, okay? Because we're adding in that double barrel, we got the quarter reps, right? Here, back up. We can train various problem areas, okay? The top of the curl is a problem, the bottom of the curl is a problem. On top of that, if we've got a wrestler, if we've got a field hockey player, we've got somebody who does a lot of elbow flexion
and need strength endurance. This is a real easy way to train that strength endurance. You're adding in extra reps by adding in those quarter reps at the bottom and at the top. So it's a nice movement that's gonna blow up your biceps, and it's gonna increase your strength and your strength endurance, and that's exactly what you're gonna need if you're an athlete trying to get better.
So if you've ever wondered if cheat curls have a place in gaining arm size, this video is for you. We're gonna dive into 3 different aspects of why cheat curls are so important, how you can use them, and how you can implement them to increase strength, increase size, and gain that forearm girth and strength. One of the things I want to do is just go over what exactly is a cheat curl. So if I've got some very heavy weights here, okay, one of the things I might do is alter the way my torso is working. If these were a little bit lighter, I could be really, really strict with my curls. But because these are so heavy, I can get a little bit of a lean, a little bit of a cheat, and try and swing them in. And what that ends up doing is I can get a little bit of a cheat up, but on that eccentric portion, or the portion of when you're lowering the dumbbell, I'm gonna actually be able to hold that weight and lower it a little bit slower, which is gonna lead to a little bit more strength in my forearm, a little bit more size in my forearm, because that eccentric portion is where we're gonna have a little bit more of that muscle damage. And over time, that eccentric portion is gonna create a little bit more neural drive, okay? So that cheat curl is, in theory and in reality, from a physiological perspective, it's potentiating your nervous system, and that's where the strength component comes in. So if I can do cheat curls for a set of 8 with 80 to 100 pound dumbbells, and then I rest a minute, now all of a sudden we're training our arms in that anaerobic alactic energy system. So about a minute in, we should recover about 70%, and I could pick up, I know these are 25s, but I could in theory pick up 60s, and now I can do more focused concentric work, get a better contraction at the top, and a good eccentric portion of the lift. And now, because of the cheat curls, my nervous system has potentiated a little bit more, and I'm able to handle a higher load. And over time, that's gonna create a little bit more muscular density, okay? So I could potentially be adding more myofibers and sarcomeres to my forearm, which is gonna increase my grip strength. It's gonna improve my joint integrity around my elbow. It's also gonna improve my bicep strength and bicep density, okay? Bicep density is gonna lead to that improved strength. We're increasing that grip strength. We're also working on grip, just holding those heavy cheat curls. We're also increasing muscular density. And the final aspect that I love to do is I might pick up heavy dumbbells, hammer these out, cheating as much as I can, potentiating, getting a massive pump, and now we're gonna dive into sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. We're gonna try and get a massive pump. The cell's gonna expand inside of our bicep or inside of our forearm muscles. I'm gonna rest 30 seconds, and I'm gonna pick up light dumbbells, very, very light dumbbells, and I'm gonna try and get a huge metabolic response. So that metabolic response is gonna generate some hydrogen ions, some lactate into my biceps, and that's gonna increase the size of the muscular cell. And in turn, not only am I increasing the density from the heavy cheat curls, I'm increasing my forearm strength, forearm size. I'm also gonna increase the size of my bicep because those cheat curls have potentiated that entire muscular range. And now I finish with a drop set of 25 to 30 reps. The blood flow is going crazy. The water's flushing into my muscle cell. It's expanding. And now I'm gonna have much more size in my biceps. So those are 3 key ways to using cheat curls to increase size, strength, and forearm grip strength. And I'm gonna dive deep into the topic behind what is better or more effective for growing those big biceps and the big triceps. Is it moving fast or is it moving slow? I think this is something that we've got to come in and we've got to start to understand from a physiological perspective, is that what kind of growth are we looking for? What are we trying to accomplish? If we're trying to lead to mass gains, then we know that we've got to train in that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy rep ranges. We know we've got to be doing 8 to 20 plus reps. We know that we've got to bring in extracellular water. We know that we have to be under tension. Okay, so if we also want to increase our muscular strength, then we know that we've got to be working under 8 reps. We've got to be targeting the myofibers so that we can then stimulate myofibrillar hypertrophy. And so that's where you've got to start when you're starting to understand what's better, moving fast or moving slow, and then comprehend that if we're going to be moving rapidly, then we're going to be targeting a little bit more of coordination. The coordination aspect, we're going to be targeting a bit more better proprioception and better mind-muscle connection. If we're going to be going a little bit slower with slow eccentric, now we understand that the eccentric portion of the lift is when we're going to have the most muscular damage, and that's when over time satellite cells can get recruited to then renovate the myofibers or renovate potentially the sarcolemma, which is then going to lead to increased gains and increased size in those biceps and those triceps. And so what I recommend doing is doing both fast lifts and slow lifts. And the best way to do that is utilizing multiple different types of exercises together. Okay, so to start with, I'm gonna introduce to you the slam curl. Okay, the slam curl is a great way to explode with your biceps and to hit that sticking point. So if your sticking point's right around 90 degrees, you're gonna explode into that barbell. That barbell's gonna explode into the pins. When we're doing slam curls, we're gonna hold that for 4 to 6 seconds, and then we're gonna repeat that motion. We're gonna do that again. We're gonna explode back up to that sticking point, hold for 4 to 6 seconds, and then lower again. And what ends up happening is that while you're doing the slam curls, you're able to be a little bit more explosive. You're able to feel that muscular connection in your biceps, and your body's gonna start to recruit more high threshold motor units because it's trying to burst through those pins. It doesn't know that it can't get through the pins. It's an immovable object. But that's the beauty behind understanding physiology, is that we can use slam curls, and then after we hit those slam curls, we can go over and do simple standing curls for sets of 15 to 20 to get a nice pump. And while we're doing that, we can utilize slow eccentric movements. We can control on the way down, which is going to lead to more muscular damage. We've got to remember these principles. Lengthening is strengthening. So as the bicep lengthens here, it's shortened now, it's going to lengthen over time, okay? And it will lengthen through the entire process. That's when muscular damage is going to occur. So then we can rest for about 2 minutes. Hopefully, we can get our alactic energy system is recovered. We can get back in and we can smash those slam curls, and we're gonna rest about a minute, and we're gonna head back to those slow curls, okay, the slow eccentric curls. So that's gonna lead to explosive gains, and that's one aspect too behind the biceps, is the biceps tend to be a little bit slower twitch. So they don't respond tremendously well to slam curls, but they respond very, very, very well to slam curls mixed with a slow eccentric. Second set of bicep exercises that we're gonna throw at you is the drop curl mixed with a controlled standing bicep curl that's controlled eccentrically, okay? So the drop curl is absolutely one of my favorite explosive movements for biceps. And what you end up doing is when you're standing at the top, you'll release the bar, you'll catch at the bottom, and you'll explode back up to the top. And this is going to lead to incredible recruitment, incredible coordination. You're gonna rest about 60 seconds to 90 seconds, and after you're done that, you're gonna head over and you're gonna do controlled eccentric standing barbell curls, okay? As you're doing those two exercises together, you will notice a huge pump in the slow eccentrics, because when you're doing the drop curls, you're not just drop curling 65 pounds. You're actually drop curling significantly more than that, because your biceps have to absorb and recruit those motor units to stimulate that flexion in the elbow on the way back up, and then that's going to lead to massive gains in the strict bicep curls that you're using with the straight bar. So the third exercise pairing is going to be entirely based around those triceps, okay? So we want to be explosive and move rapidly, and we've got to remember our triceps tend to be a bit more fast twitch, so they respond very, very well to explosive movements, and they respond even better to explosive movements paired with slow eccentrics that are a little bit heavier. Okay, so one of the best things when we think about that is, okay, we need to stimulate growth with the myofibers. We need to stimulate muscular coordination. We need to stimulate those high threshold motor units. And by using explosive push-ups, it's simple, it's rudimentary, but they are absolutely incredible because you're driving up, you're accelerating through the entire path. You're gonna be utilizing those fast twitch muscle fibers, you're gonna be catching, and then when you drop off of those benches, you're gonna land, and that force absorption is in the pecs and in the triceps, and all of a sudden that force absorption is also going to lead to a little bit more high threshold motor unit recruitment. It's like a depth drop for the upper body. So if we execute that, let's say 5 sets of 5, but between each set, we're gonna go over and we're gonna do close grip. You can pick, you can do slow eccentric close grip bench, and you can do a pretty significant weight, something like 315, and you will lower that slowly, and that's gonna hammer your triceps, and this is gonna carry over very, very well to sports performance. You can do dips if you would like. You could do, neutral grip bench presses if you would like, but any exercise that's going to target those triceps in a compound movement is absolutely tremendous for stimulating tricep growth. So again, I like to do the explosive movement, rest about 60 seconds, then do that slow eccentric all the way down, try and feel that lengthening, drive up fast with the triceps because they respond very well to moving a little bit faster, more rapidly, and that's going to lead to incredible gains in size and in strength. And that's what we've got to remember when training biceps and triceps. We've got to lead by training size and strength because they go together.
One of the best ways to increase bicep strength is to do the preacher curl. But that's only one means of putting the clip in the loaded guns. You can't just attack your biceps with one direct exercise. We've got to take a greater macro global approach. We've got to attack the biceps through different means of training. There's many ways to make sure that the bicep is maintaining and increasing size and strength. Antagonizing the biceps with various pressing movements and even using various grips, like our garage grips, are great ways to try to increase the strength of your biceps. So here's 6 key principles that you can use to build the caliber of your biceps to that 950 JDJ. All right, so let's get into the anatomy and the physiology of the biceps. It's pretty freaking simple. If we just look at the biceps, especially the long and the short head, they're gonna be responsible for elbow flexion, okay? We're also gonna bring in the brachialis, which is gonna help us contribute to supination and pronation. Supinate, pronate. And then on top of that, if we look at actual shoulder abduction, okay, so there is some debate right now in the anatomy world on the role that the actual bicep plays with shoulder abduction, but we know it does play some role to help stabilize the shoulder. So when we're looking at bicep movements, even the sweep movement that we used to do back in high school, we called this the Yoder underhook. It was something that we used a lot for wrestling, okay? I do believe there's enough research that'll show you the brachialis is responsible for a very large amount of force, okay? It's sort of that muscle that's hidden underneath the big biceps, okay? The 2 main bicep heads. Also, we've got to think about how are we going to grow the biceps, okay? How are we going to grow the short head, the long head, the brachialis? You've got to think through mechanical tension. So a long time under tension. We want to look for that myofibrillar hypertrophy. That's going to increase our strength. We want to look for that sarcoplasmic hypertrophy to get those cells a little bit more swole like I'm getting right now. And then finally, that can happen through metabolic stress and through muscular damage. And again, all this is going to go back to mechanical tension. Gosh, I'm getting a pump already. You guys want this sick, swole t-shirt? If you comment down below, you like, you subscribe, and you have all notifications on, and then you show up to next week's YouTube Live at 9 a.m. Eastern, you'll be eligible to win this free t-shirt so that your biceps can look nice and swole in that commercial gym. Now, let's get into that first key nugget. The anatomy of the bicep makes it a pulling muscle. And oftentimes people traditionally will train the bicep with rowing motions, with pull-ups, with more back work. But that's something that we're gonna find out in that first nugget that might not be the best. So that first principle is that we should actually be doing pressing movements with our biceps. That actually means chest and buys, not back and buys. And so how can we do that? We can do different presses like a technical coordination movement like this right here. You can go here and do a nice PA press, okay? Ooh, let's say we do 5 sets of 4 and we try and load that weight. Try to increase that global innervation. The next step that you can do is if you don't want to do a technical coordination movement like a push press, a behind the neck jerk, or a PA press, you can do pressing movements that are absolute strength related. Dips, dumbbell benches, flat bench, incline bench, military press, and you can pair those with bicep work. Or you can even do accessory movements like explosive push-ups or explosive push-ups to boxes and superset them with other types of bicep work. But one of the things that actually happens is that your biceps will recover more when you're doing those big pressing movements, okay? It gives your biceps a little bit more time to handle that volume, to handle that intensity. And then when you come back to that bicep exercise, you're actually gonna be stronger, you're gonna have longer time under tension, and in turn, lead to more strength and size. And inside of our at peak strength, we use a lot of pressing movements with bicep exercises. So why do I not like doing back and buys together? And when is it actually okay to do back and buys together? Typically, the reason why I don't like to do back and buys together is if I'm trying to increase my pull-up. This is a really good example, or my rope climb, and I'm trying to get a ton of strength in my back and in my biceps and in my forearms. I wanna do this through a compound movement, like a pull-up, like a rope climb. But if I'm fatiguing that more and I'm doing a pull-up and then I'm doing a preacher curl, what ends up happening is that that can pull away from that strength that'll improve when I'm doing the pull-up or when I'm doing the rope climb. There are times, however, if I have an athlete who's lagging tremendously with their bicep and they just need a ton of volume or they struggle to lock out that pull-up at the top, I might use a rep scheme like pre-fatigue. So we might do preacher curls and then go do chin-ups. That's when I would use them together, but typically we don't do that as frequently. And one of the big factors that you can also do is that if you don't like using PA presses like this, okay, and you're inside of our at peak strength, you can actually use the replacement exercise tool to find an exercise that fits your needs and your goals. And the same is gonna hold true for rows. I think these are great exercises to build the back and to build the biceps, especially if we're doing a little bit of a slow eccentric. Now, I still would like to pair this with another type of pressing movement. But let's say we're doing 5 sets of 12 on a nice strict bent over row, you're gonna get some nice growth out of those biceps and forearms. Ooh. Head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store, the Apple iOS Store, and you can download Peak Strength today for 1 free week of training. The worst thing that's gonna happen, you're gonna get 5 free workouts. You want a bigger belly? You gotta eat more. You want a bigger brain? Of course you have to read more. You want bigger biceps? You have to smash your biceps with a ton of volume and different training modalities. Principle number 2 revolves around volume. Size matters. So we've got to hit a lot of volume. I recommend with the rep schemes, don't go below 7 to 9 reps. Now, the brachialis, because it can have a bit more force than our long and short head, should be trained in that 7 to 9 rep range with a lot of force. But the overarching principle is that really we want to long to live within that 12 to 17 rep range. That's gonna give us a lot of mechanical tension. And if we train through that 12 to 17 rep range and then finish our actual exercises with 20 to 25 reps, that's when our forearms, our brachialis, our biceps will get a huge pump, and we know the pump can lead to greater gains in size and strength. So that's gonna take us into specific modalities, and we're gonna go over each way that you can train the biceps with types of strength characteristics. So the first one could be blast impulse. We know from running and sprinting and jumping, that happens in a very short time frame. How can we do that with the biceps? We can focus on force absorption, focus on that trunk control, and then that rapid rate of coordination. We're gonna rate code our biceps to actually be explosive, which is typically not what happens because they're a little bit slower twitch. but the biceps respond very well to that fast movement. Another sweet modality is that you can use cheat curls, okay? So we can go, heavy hammer curls here, get a little swing from that torso. Let's say you do a set of 7 on each arm. And then after you hit that set of 7, you can do a little bit of a drop set with a more strict curl at lighter weight. But this modality will actually help us train sustained impulse and even into power 15 plus. And then another really unique way that we can train through a different modality is we can focus on that fast action here, okay? And then you can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up fast, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can even get a little bit of an isometric action at the top. But this is a great way, that slow eccentric is a great way to strengthen the biceps, lead to more size, lead to more strength. And it's another modality that you can just cycle through to force a great adaptation. So we've got to look at grip and wrist angles, okay? And if we could just stand here, let's say we're here and we just flex like we're grabbing a ball. You can feel something specifically. Now, let's say you stand here and you flex and you think like you're grabbing a ball. And I'm just envisioning Joel Seedman doing those weird curls during COVID. Now, you can turn your palm away and you can do the hokey pokey. But this will show us the principle that we're gonna be talking about now in principle 3 is that wrist angles and grip training matters for bicep growth. So if we're looking at strictly size in our short and long head of the biceps, okay, we're gonna have that neutral position. And if we even have some elbow issues, this neutral position is gonna help us get more swole. And it's also gonna improve the size of our brachioradialis, which is another forearm muscle that will contribute to arm flexion a little bit. Now, the other factor that we can do is actually rotate here. And if we wanna train that brachialis, okay, we can just get this little bit of a rotation, and that's gonna lead to more improvement also in our forearm and that brachialis, which will help improve the force and the speed of our arm flexion. Whew. Now, one of the best ways to lead to bicep strength, forearm strength, grip strength that's gonna transfer really well to the sports performance world is to use our garage grips, okay? So we can add a fat grip around that dumbbell. Okay, and that's gonna lead to greater high threshold motor unit recruitment in the prime mover of that action. So in this case, my short head and my long head will actually have a little bit more high threshold motor unit recruitment, which will improve that rate coding. I like to do this with wrestlers, if they're grabbing, pulling, trying to have that mat strength, even if we're talking about shot putters and we need that elbow strength. So you can train that grip work by putting a towel or using the garage grip to increase that high threshold motor unit recruitment, which leads to more strength and ultimately more size. We can also use various bars to get that same response, like an easy curl bar, preferably one that has a fat grip, like a straight bar. But be careful, some people do get some pain in their forearm from straight bar curls. You can change it up by changing the strength curve by curling kettlebells. You can use a sick football bar. You can even use a crazy shot put bar if you have access to it. Sometimes just straight up volume can get a little boring. But what if I told you you could do something kinky in the weight room to get a little bit more swole? Principle 4 is going to be based off of Katsu. This is a version of BFR, and my first exposure to this is that one of my best friends from high school moved to Japan to learn how to speak Japanese, and he came home on a break and he said, dude, look at this crazy exercise that people are doing. They were wrapping bands around their biceps and just hitting really, really high weights. And then lo and behold, there is actually some science behind BFR training. And so there is actually some research that shows that blood flow restriction can be very productive. So if you're someone who has an injury, or if you need to lift with lighter loads, what you can do is you can find the proper tools to use BFR or train with Katsu, and you can do really, really high rep sets, 2, 3, 4 sets of 30 with very short rest periods. This will lead to an increase in size and at least a maintenance of strength. I believe even a little bit higher improvement in strength gains. And typically I would recommend doing this on day 5, your hypertrophy day. Just be aware, make sure you're using the right tools and you're doing this effectively. Some people could put themselves in a precarious position. That's why I'm not even demonstrating it, but this is a method that has been proven to be effective. So the guns are locked and loaded, but how can we make sure that that caliber is as strong strong as it needs to be. That takes us to principle Skinner. Principle number 5. We have to get as strong as possible. And that first principle underneath this principle of getting as strong as possible is actually going to be something we mentioned earlier. Okay, so one thing that you can do is that if you have horribly weak biceps, you can use pre-fatigue. So you can do an exercise like a curl. Okay, so I'm standing here, I'm doing curls. Let's pretend that I'm getting extraordinarily fatigued. I'm doing a set of 12 to 17 reps. Okay, so I go 12 to 17 reps. Now I will have muscle enervation, E-enervation, okay? So there's gonna be some fatigue. I'm gonna rest for about 30 to 40 seconds. I wouldn't go much more than 40 seconds, and typically you'll see the best response to pre-fatigue around 30 seconds. Now what I can do is I can get up on the bar here, okay? And I can do a compound movement. And I wanna squeeze at the top. So, the first principle of getting as strong as possible is that you stimulate the biceps through the isolation movement, and then you lead to further strength gains through the compound movement. Part of getting as strong as possible is maximizing those antagonistic supersets. We talked about stop doing back and bis. Stop doing that. I know that you can do that with the pre-fatigue. That's a great way to stimulate some growth. But people do this for their entire career. If you want to focus on a mainstay of strength, that entire career should really be focused on antagonistic supersets. So you could get in, you hit a set of 17 or 20 tricep pushdowns, okay? So you get this crazy pump, right? And we want to get some serious growth going, okay? So we get 17 to 20 reps here. Stimulate the triceps, okay? Now, rest 30 to 60 seconds, and we're gonna walk over to the cable over here, and we can just hit that standing cable curl. So we're here, come up, squeeze at the top. Hit this for 17 to 20 reps, and then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take about a minute rest and head back to that tricep pushdown. So that's a really easy way to maximize the effectiveness of antagonistic supersets. Part of that getting stronger umbrella is going to be these faster movements. And we showed you earlier, these crazy drop curls, okay? You could do 7 reps of drop curls. Another freaking phenomenal movement that I love, and I've used quite a bit with a lot of my athletes, is going to be slam curls. Gosh, that's loud. But one thing that you can do is focus on blasting through wherever that plateau might be inside of your curl. So you can change these pins in this old school power rack and elevate that different to wherever that strength problem is that you have. And I even like to pair those slam curls with something like this. It's gonna be a little bit more rapid through the full range of motion. So if I've got my strength power elastic here, available at garagestrength.com, I can actually change my grip like this, or here, and I can focus on being as fast and as rapid as possible. If I'm a fighter or I'm a wrestler, I have to learn how to move as quickly as possible. And a lot of that is gonna involve pushing, pulling, and elbow flexion, okay? So that's where these exercises come into play. Again, 5 sets of 7 as quickly as possible. That's gonna help develop that strength and bust through any possible strength plateaus that you might have from that elbow flexion. If you remember back to the beginning of the video, we can also overload the biceps with some rowing exercises. But again, you should be training the rowing with antagonistic supersets. So if I have weak lats and weak biceps, I'm gonna pair this with the dumbbell bench press. And you can see that inside of our app, Peak Strength. I like to focus on increasing my bicep strength from that massive overload and really focusing on the eccentric portion of a row. So if we can think through precision programming, we would look at, all right, if I'm training an upper body power day and I want to be explosive, I'm going to use a movement like slam curls or drop curls, okay? If I want to really focus on more hypertrophy, let's say on that day 5, that's where I'm probably going to focus on a little bit more of the isolation movements that aren't as rapid, that give me more time under tension, a slow eccentric, and then that fast concentric with a squeeze at the top. That's how we think about training the biceps on that weekly structured basis. So the caliber, the clip, the guns are locked and loaded for you to smash the biceps daily. But which weapon should you choose? Which exercise is going to keep those victories coming? And this takes us to principle 6. we have to focus on exercise selection. And choosing the exercise matters depending upon where are we weak? What do we need in the realm of sports performance? What do we need if we just want to look better and have bigger biceps and fill out our sleeves? All of these different aspects comes back to exercise selection. The preacher curl is gonna blow up our short and long heads. The spider curl is gonna lengthen the crap out of that long head and also lead to a massive amount of gains. The zottman curl is gonna train the brachialis and the two heads of the biceps. The power elastic curl can be done explosively or even through a controlled range of motion. The incline curl is a great movement to strengthen the long head of the bicep and even where that insertion point is with the shoulder. And homers are an absolutely incredible way to train the biceps under a very long time under tension. That's gonna lead to a ton of sarcoplasmic growth. Being tactical and planning your gun show and creating that medley of bigger, stronger, better biceps doesn't have to be hard. What exactly are the positions of flexion? If we can think about biceps in general, okay, we're going to go through 3 different positions and we're going to start off with the mid-range position. So the mid-range position is typically going to be any time that our upper arm is in front of our torso. That's going to be mid-range. So if we are doing standing barbell curls, right? Preacher curls, or Scott curls is what they really should be called, but preacher curls. Anything along those lines. So the preacher curls, standing barbell curls, both of these movements, our upper arm is going to stay in front of our torso. So that means that we're in a bit more advantageous position. So we can actually focus on a little bit more strength work. And that's the biggest key behind the mid-range, is that if we can hit the bicep from every single angle, now all of a sudden we can understand that the mid-range angle that we're going to be working towards is the strongest angle to be hitting. So we could be using a bit more strength focus lifts to increase size. So if we need to potentiate our muscles in our biceps, we understand that we need to hit standing barbell curls, standing dumbbell curls, or preacher curls. Now, the next position that we're going to be using would be the stretch position. Okay, so what we like to use here at Garage Strength and what we've utilized in the past in Bis and Tris 1, and this is where we started to introduce this concept in Bis and Tris 1, is the stretch principle. The stretch principle leads to a bit of a lengthening of that muscle. Lengthening is strengthening. I'm going to say this over and over again throughout my life. Lengthening is strengthening. And in that stretch position, we're going to see dumbbell incline curls, and we're going to see post curls. And post curls are something I wrote about specifically in Bis and Tris 1. And so what ends up happening in the stretched position is that the upper arm will actually be behind the torso. So because it's behind the torso, now it's going to be fully lengthened. And when you're doing these exercises, now we've got another angle that we're hitting. We're not just hitting that mid-range angle, we're hitting that stretched angle. And if you add in a little bit of a wrist extension here, now we're going to really start to feel a little bit of a stretch and a little bit of a pull through our biceps. And that is going to stimulate that myotatic reflex, okay? So when that myotatic reflex is woken up, now all of a sudden your muscle starts to contract a little bit more, and it's a little bit easier to recruit those high threshold motor units when utilizing dumbbell incline curls and even doing post curls. Okay, one of the reasons why I really like doing post curls is we do those when we're standing. So when we're upright, when we're standing and we're leaning back, now we can actually even use a little bit more weight. So on the eccentric portion, we're going to get even a little bit more of the brachioradialis targeted on those post curls, but both of those exercises are really, really good if you need to hit the stretched angle. And the final position of flexion that we need to cover is going to be the contracted position. Okay, so think about where the upper arm is going to be closest to our head. That's where we're going to get to that contracted position. Think of that classic Arnold Schwarzenegger pose where he's doing the double flex. That is a perfect example of a contracted position, of that different angle that we need to develop that peak and to develop that mind-muscle connection, to increase our proprioception with the bicep curls. And so we're going to use
At garage strength, we typically will use 2, maybe 3. We'll use, to start off, we'll do spider curls. So spider curls, you can be laying on an incline bench, you can be laying over a box, and you're gonna be curling that barbell or the easy curl bar or dumbbells up to your head. So the upper arm is going to be very close to your head. And when you get to the top, now you have to flex your wrist, and that's going to lead to a little bit greater contraction in the bicep. And when that ends up happening, now we have greater mind muscle connection, and we can control a little bit better on the eccentric, and that's going to develop that peak very, very well. When we hit the glute ham curl with the dumbbell head, this is one of my favorite exercises, and if you watched my top 3 bicep builders, that's one of them, because the glute ham dumbbell head curl is all focusing on contraction, and it's going to be developing that brachioradialis. And when we factor in some grip work into our programming, now we're going to have to recruit a little bit more from our prime movers, which is our biceps. So if we're looking to increase the peak, that's the exercise to utilize. And so what ends up happening is now we've hit this from every single angle. We've hit the biceps from 3 different angles: the mid-range, the stretched, and the contracted. And to develop a program, and this is what we've done in Bis and Tris 1 and 2, is we've sat there and said, okay, if we want to focus on our strength, let's hammer this first. We're gonna do standing barbell curls for a set of 5. That's gonna potentiate our nervous system. Okay, so maybe we do 1 set of 5 preacher curls or standing barbell curls with 145 pounds, and that's gonna wake our nervous system up. That's gonna get everything moving. We're gonna rest about 20 to 30 seconds. We're gonna head over to the post curls or the dumbbell incline curls. Well, now we're gonna rest, and we're gonna get that wrist extension, that nice lengthening of the bicep. That's gonna further wake up our nervous system. It's gonna start to stretch and lengthen that bicep, which is going to lead to high threshold motor unit recruitment that was also stimulated from that mid-range. And now we're gonna start to fatigue those high threshold motor units. We need to remember that a fatigued muscle fiber is a trained muscle fiber. And we're gonna go through maybe around reps of 10 to 12 on the post curls of the dumbbell incline. And then we're gonna finish off with spider curls or the glute ham curl with the dumbbell head. And we're gonna go a little bit lighter on these so that we can hammer out a whole bunch of reps to continue to fatigue those fibers and to continue to fatigue those high threshold motor units, because that's where we're gonna get our biggest gains in our arm flexors. Is once they're stimulated, we must fatigue them. And so we're gonna go through this, let's say standing barbell curls, 5 sets of 5 at a pretty significant weight. Dumbbell incline curls, 5 sets at 8 to 12. Somewhere in about 70 to 80% of your max. And then we're gonna finish off at about 50% of your max on spider curls for sets of 25, okay? So we're gonna do 5 sets through, and by the time you're done, this tricep, you will be completely fatigued and your arms will be blown to bits with sarcoplasmic hypertrophy.
If you're doing something laborious on a regular basis, your body is adapting that way, and it can handle a larger load at a lower intensity. It's very important for me to make sure I'm still doing full range of motion hypertrophy work. I think from doing a lot of plyometrics and doing a lot of squats, being aware of my body, that's helping me to brace very quickly. The process of aging, we've got to make sure that we're increasing that structural stability as we get older, because that's like one of the first things that we lose.